All right, we are going to go ahead and get started. So thank you and hi everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for the welcome session for the Virtual Military Adaptive Sports Expo. My name is Bree Podgorski. I'm the Member Services Coordinator with Move United. I will be your POC moving forward for all things Move United Warfighters, and I'm really here to be a resource for you. So before we get started, I do want to go over a couple housekeeping items. Closed captioning is on for this session. And is enabled. So if you need to adjust the font, please feel free to do so as needed. If you drop from the session and need help logging back in, please contact me at bpodgorski@moveunitedsport.org, and I'll drop that in the chat as well. And you can submit any questions you may have through the Q&A function, and we'll have time to address those at the end. And if you want to say hi and introduce yourself in the chat, please make sure that your message is set to all panelists and attendees so you can introduce yourself. So again, thank you so much for joining us. Warm weather is finally here or maybe approaching where you live. And Move United wants to help you reframe how you're active and ensure that you have those resources available to you to do so. So this half-day expo is designed to give you the what, when, and how on staying active this summer and beyond. So we're going to take a look at the rest of the sessions. Tim, if you don't mind moving the next slide, please. That are available to you today. If any of these are speaking to you and you haven't registered yet, please, there's still time, and please do so through the link that we'll drop in the chat. And if you have any issues, you can reach out to our tech support, James Arnold at jarnold@moveunitedsport.org or 240-268-9375, and I'll drop that in the chat as well. So later on today, here are some of the sessions that we'll be covering. You can find out how to find a local program or how to access exercises online to keep you engaged. We'll talk a little bit more about our Move United Warfighters Ambassadors program for anyone who might be interested in that. Later this afternoon, we'll take a quick movement session break to get your blood pumping. One of our Move United Warfighters Ambassadors, Max Roan, is at the Chula Vista Training Center, and he's just going to run through a quick workout with us while telling us a bit about how he got started in adaptive sports and his future plans of competing in Tokyo. If you're more interested in that competitive route, tune into our 3:45 session covering Move United sanctioned competitions schedule, as well as you can hear from a VA representative on any VA national sports events available to you as well. And finally, we'll close out the afternoon with opportunities for you to give back to your community, whether that be an adaptive sports instructor trainings or volunteer opportunities. We'll lay it all out for you. And like I said, if you haven't already, you can still sign up for any session that interests you. I'll drop the link in the chat, and if you have any tech issues, just reach out. And with that, I'm going to keep it short and sweet and turn it over to our Executive Director, Glenn Mary, to give you a little welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be with you, and happy to share with you some information around Move United and the programming that we do, what are kind of the when, where, and why of our organization, and how we interact with veterans through the Warfighter program at Move United. If we could go to the next slide. Just to kind of kick things off, this is our formal, this slide is a slide of our mission statement, but it boils down to our mission is to change lives through the power of sport for people with disabilities. And we see that tool of sports as really pivotal to kind of unlocking a lot of different potentials. So it's not the end all of just participating in sport, but that certainly is the tool to effectuate change for people with disabilities. And we do that through a whole host of ways. But first, I thought I'd take a moment to talk about kind of the reach of the organization, a little bit more about who we are. The organization has changed greatly over the last 2.5 years. Many of you may have been familiar with Disabled Sports USA. It's the same organization. We've gone through kind of a metamorphosis over the past few years. So I'll talk about that in a moment in our vision for Vision 2028. But currently, our organization has served 15,000 veterans and their families since we began the Warfighter sports program since 2003. Our reach nationally is about 100,000 individuals, and that's mainly due to the power of the chapter and member network that we have. That's grown significantly in the last 2 years, about 40% larger than it was in 2018. And we're approaching 200 chapters and member organizations in 43 states around the country. I'll talk about why that's important to our mission and our vision of where we want to be by 2028 in a moment. But I want to talk a little bit more about the strength of Move United. And the next slide. This slide outlines a little bit more detail around how we operate. And if you think about Move United as a national leader in the adaptive sports space, it's really because of the power of the network of members that we bring together. And those members represent more than 43 states and 200 locations around the country, but they also represent more than 70 different sports offerings through the different things that they do. Some are very specific and focused on outdoor recreation. Others are focused on competitions, and yet others are just focused on sport for the sake of fitness and health. And when it comes down to it, Move United believes in several kind of key pieces of that. One is that sport makes us more, and that through sport, people recognize their potential. It pushes them to their boundaries and beyond. It allows others to see the capabilities of people with disabilities. And another component of that, or kind of a sister component of that, is this concept of just ask. And this pillar of what Move United does is it allows people to engage in conversation with people with disabilities, either because they're participating with team members and organizational members at the local level at their community-based programming, where they get to experience sport with other similarly minded people with disabilities, but also to the American public, and giving people an opportunity to observe and understand the capabilities and what potential people with disabilities have. And that it's not a limitation, it's an adaptation, it's an opportunity to be inclusive. And finally, this concept of joining in the movement of Move United is kind of the third piece of that. And this all flows through this community network and how we activate at the local level and the power that that brings. I'll talk a moment about our vision for the growth of that network, but some other key aspects about Move United, despite having a name change from Disabled Sport USA to Move United in the past year, we have a long history of working in the adaptive sports industry with more than 50 years experience. And one of the really interesting things about our organization is that it was initiated by the 10th Mountain Division programming adaptive skiing out at Lake Tahoe. So our roots are really focused and come out of the strength of the veterans community, helping each other and promoting a healthy and engaging lifestyle through sport. We have, as a national organization, we're a member of the US Olympic and Paralympic Committee, and that group really represents the pinnacle of sport at the adaptive sport level as far as the Paralympics. We don't train Paralympians, but we are the genesis, the origin story for so many Paralympians. And we've been recognized for our community-based programs with the Rings of Gold Award just last year. One of the things when we look at programming is how effective are we? And we're metrics-driven, research-driven, so that we can actually articulate the value that we bring and how we change lives. And we're engaged right now in a research study with the University of Illinois that will allow us to speak even more specifically about what we bring to the community and how we change lives. But going back to 2009, we know the impact that sports has for people with disabilities as far as their engagement, their healthy lifestyle, their mental health, their lack of being isolated and bringing people together. And that effectiveness is tied to our efficiency. So every dollar that comes through Move United, 90 cents of that dollar goes back out in the form of direct programming to individuals with disabilities. We don't spend a lot of money on marketing. We don't spend a lot of money on flash and fundraising. We really are focused around our core principles of delivering sports programming to our community. As far as the specific context of veterans, we're amongst, if not the largest organization to work with adaptive sports and injured and wounded veterans. And since 2003, as I said, we've served more than 15,000 veterans and their families at no cost. And we do that through a really unique network of partners that allow us to bring this forward. Some of them are corporate partners, some of them are the VA Adaptive Sports Program, others are private donations. And that allows us to continue to grow and support a long-term program around the warfighter and the warfighter sports program that we've had for so long. And finally, the leadership of the organization, we do have a volunteer board that represents executives and in corporate industry, from the defense industry, from the non-defense industry. We have representatives and leaders from within our adaptive sports community. So there's a great familiarity with the actual work that's being done on the ground, as well as athletes, both Paralympians and non-Paralympians, that have participated in our programming over the more than 6 decades that we've been in existence. So as we talk about who we are now, I want to talk a little bit about an endeavor that began back in 2019. So I've been with the organization for about 2.5 years, and I came into an organization that's strong, sound, does great work, well respected. And my role at that time is to kind of sort out, what does the future look like? And as we did that in January of 2019, we did it from the context, or from the lens of where do we want to go? What do we think we can do with this organization? And what is the setting that we're in right now? And some of those key elements are outlined in this slide in these bullet points. I won't go through every single one, but I'll highlight a few. One is, in the adaptive sports industry, it is fragmented. There are a lot of different players who do a lot of different things. Perhaps the most nationally recognized is US Paralympics. And that organization really focuses on 0.1% of the athletes in this country that are taking part in adaptive sports. We know that the American population, 20% of it identifies with a disability. And that number is likely to rise as we see an aging of America, as we see more conflicts and more people coming back injured or wounded. And because of that, we see there's a greater need in the future. We also have this really unique opportunity coming forward in 2028. And it's one of the reasons that we call this Vision 28. It was about a 10-year span that we could kind of set some high, lofty goals around. And in 2028, the Paralympics will return to Los Angeles. And while we're not a Paralympic organization, what that does is it shifts the media footprint to draw attention to people with disabilities, their capabilities, what they are able to do if they're included in the discussion, what they're able to do when sports are adapted for their participation. And with the games returning to Los Angeles, we think the eyes of the country will be refreshed about, geez, there's an interest to take part in adaptive sport. So we wanted to ensure that we had built a system and a structure that would allow the growth needed to move forward. And how this relates directly to veterans and warfighters who've come through the rehab hospitals like Walter Reed or BAMC is that we're kind of that next step in care for veterans. When they go back home, how are they staying active? How are they staying socially engaged? How are they keeping themselves healthy, both physically and mentally? And those components of having community-based sports programming engage people. We know that power of sport nationally. Americans love sport. If they're not fans of their favorite professional team or college team, then they've been competing. If they weren't competitors, they played games growing up. It's probably their first social interaction with the kids in their neighborhood. And so this essence of sport as an opportunity to engage is super important. But as we look at this, the context of our vision, our expertise and reputation was fantastic going into this. And what we've done is we've oriented ourselves with a new brand and energy to gather greater attention, both from financial partners to allow us to do more programming and provide grants, but also to elevate the level of opportunity for people to engage with us, to make it more aware that there is such a thing as adaptive sport. The element recently over the last 18 months in this lens of diversity and equity in American society has been heavily focused outside of disability. But in the last year, we celebrated the 30th anniversary of the American Disabilities Act, or the ADA. And there's enormous opportunity as a social movement to move forward and create more equity for people with disabilities, whether it's access in day-to-day life activities, or whether it's equity in sport. And so as a national leader, we see our opportunity to create a vision that would allow us to do this. And as we look at the next slide, and I apologize for those of you that are looking at it because it's a bit of a mess as far as the text and font size, but the elements of our vision are really about this concept that every person, regardless of their ability, should be able to participate in sport and have an equal opportunity. And whether that means competitive sport or recreational sport, that there's a space and an opportunity for them to participate as a tool to change other aspects of society, to change other aspects of their life. The overarching, as we went through building our vision, the overarching goal that we have is to grow the network of opportunities so that 90% of the American public has access to one of our community-based programs within a 50-mile drive. And I'm happy to say we've made great progress in the last 2 years around that. We started at about 57% saturation, and today we're at about 74%. So we're hedging towards that. But obviously this past year has been really interesting in discussing kind of that saturation and opportunity, because a lot of our programming had to stop its in-person service. And as a result of that, we learned some important lessons. Within 2 weeks of COVID kind of hitting the United States, just about a year ago this week, we had started an online program called Adapt at Home. And we continue programming around Adapt at Home throughout the year, to the tune of about 2,200 programs that went online, that provided an access point for people through their computers, through their televisions, to participate in sport, to engage with others, to pull them out of isolation, to keep them healthy and fit. While we have a scope of 100,000 individuals in person through our chapter network, we reached an audience of 270,000 in the past year through our online programming. And so as part of our vision moving forward in saturation of opportunity for adaptive sport, we will be including an on-demand component so that people can log in and take part if they're in a location where there is not a member organization that they can participate with. I bring this as a point to kind of give you the full context. I won't go through each of the strategic priorities. Some of them have to do with ensuring that our growth with membership and locations also is matched by our growth in revenue. And I'm happy to say that in each of the past 2 years, we've grown our revenue and grant opportunities by more than 25% each year to our members. At the same time, growing during that 2-year period, 40% more members of the organization. So we are keeping up with our growth by ensuring that there's the finances and opportunities to program at the local level. The main piece for this group is the Move United Warfighters program. And our goal for this group is that while we've served 15,000 warfighters and their families over the past more than a decade, that in the coming decade, we want to expand that to meet 25,000 warfighters and their families. And we're optimistic that that's not because we're going to have additional world conflicts that result in an increased ratio and percentage of people coming back injured and wounded, but that we recognize in the past 15 years, there have been people who've come through the systems and have gone back home that we haven't engaged. There's people that are sitting on couches in living rooms around the country with a disability that are not engaged in sport. And we see this as a real opportunity as its central core of our culture at Move United and the origin story of our organization. Serving veterans is an opportunity for us. And by reaching out to more, we think that the tool to do this is at the local level, at these community-based programs. And as I said before, we've grown from about 125 organizational members to close to 200 this week. When we hit 500 or 1,000 locations around the country, then we'll have true success in the veteran who's gone through the process and is back home being able to engage in sport. To that end, we've seen some really interesting things happen over the past year. And as I look at the future of the organization around this concept of growth, and on the next slide, we talk about the growth of adaptive sports. This past year, we had this unique opportunity in partnership with the NFL to launch a new wheelchair football league. And that's around their Salute to Service program in a partnership with the Bob Woodruff Foundation to help create a new sport where anyone with a disability can participate in this, but with a highlight on getting warfighters engaged in this. And as we create additional opportunities, it won't just be in creating new sports or adapting sports that haven't been adapted yet. That's certainly part of our national partnerships with national governing bodies, but it's also this idea of being in front of more people because we're in more locations. When I talked in the beginning about some of the challenges that we identified or some of the things that were driving our discussion around our vision, I talked about kind of the fracture of so many different organizations in the adaptive sports movement. And through the rebranding in the past year of Disabled Sport USA to Move United, what we've attempted to do is focus an energy and a thoughtfulness around collectivizing adaptive sports. In the last 6 months, we merged with our sister organization, Adaptive Sport USA. That gave us this really interesting opportunity to expand from sport and recreation to include competition. And those competitions, more than 24 around the country that we are sanctioning, are part of a summer sport network where veterans and their families can participate. It's very heavily focused on youth right now, but the development opportunity is to expand that to engage more veterans in competition around the country with other veterans with disabilities. And there are many athletes, 80% of the winter team, 75% of the summer Paralympic team, that came through these types of competitions and programming that have been part of our sport, recreation, and competition programs at Move United. As I've said before, the importance of the Warfighter program is really at the granular level part of our roots. It's where we came from when the 10th Mountain Division first started volunteering and teaching veterans how to ski out in Lake Tahoe. It's critical to kind of our approach to life is being part of the fabric of rehabilitation, part of the fabric of socialization, part of the fabric of health and the welfare of our veterans who've been injured and wounded. And so the prominence of this program, if you recall back to one of the slides, there's a special logo for Move United Warfighter. And the reason for that is it's a core principle of what we do. And it's a core goal of ours, a core part of our vision to grow the opportunities for the veterans in the United States to continue to participate in the Warfighter program. So I've rambled on now for several minutes. I think there's a few minutes to take questions if people would like. I hope that gives you a kind of a thumbnail sketch of who we are, where we've been, where we're headed, and the intentions we have to help make a stronger, more robust, and more interesting network of opportunities around sports, recreation, fitness, and competition. So I'll turn it back to Bree.
Thank you, Glenn, and thank you again, everyone, for being here. I didn't see too many questions pop in through the chat, but any ones that did, I have answered individually. But if you have more questions before the next session, feel free to reach out to me. My information's on the screen now. It's also in the chat box. but I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, and I hope to see more of you at some further sessions. If this is the only session you can attend today, I am going to drop our little survey into the chat box. We love your feedback. We want to know what you want to see from us, so please help us help you. Again, if you're going to be attending more sessions, you might want to wait to fill this out because you'll see what we're going to be providing later. But if this is all you can attend, we're so happy you're here. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out.